If you've ever tried growing strawberries in the heat and ended up with tiny plants, or worse, dead ones, you're not alone. But here's the truth. Strawberries can thrive in hot climates if you do a few simple things differently. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to grow sweet, juicy strawberries even in extreme heat. Hi guys, I'm Victoria and I'm here in my strawberry patch today. I have garlic planted in with the strawberries, so you see all this garlic here, but I have some strawberries planted here. I live in northern Texas, so it is a climate that is difficult to grow strawberries in, but I have a whole huge patch here and I'm going to share my tips and tricks for growing strawberries in a hot climate. I'm going to talk about what varieties to plant, when to plant them, how to get a bigger yield, as well as some other tips for planting strawberries in the heat. So stay tuned and I'll show you how to have a thriving strawberry patch in a hot climate. So number one key tip for planting strawberries in a hot climate is the variety that you choose. I have Chandler strawberries here, and those are more heat tolerant. I'll include on the screen here a few other heat tolerant varieties. I've heard of ones like Seascape or Albion. You have to look at whether or not they're ever-bearing or day-neutral strawberries, or whether or not they're June-bearing strawberries. I have June-bearing strawberries. The reason why that's important is because in my experience and from the research that I've done in hot climates is that the June-bearing ones tend to do well because they bear before it gets hot. So right now they're flowering and I have little baby strawberries on here. And right now, at the time of recording this, it's April. And so by May here, maybe going into the beginning of June, I'll probably have some ripe strawberries. In northern climates, they bear in June. That's why they're called June bearing. But here in the south, they bear more in May. On the other hand, you have the day neutral or ever bearing varieties. Those ones don't depend on day length to bear. So you'll get fruit all summer. So if it gets warm enough, then they will give you fruit and they'll just go all summer. The thing is though, in my experience in hotter climates, they kind of shut down in the middle of the summer. Whereas these June bearing ones, they give you one big, huge crop before it gets hot. So you really want to be careful what variety you pick because there's a lot of varieties that are just made for the northern US or cooler climates and they don't do well here in the south. So really pay attention to the variety that you're choosing. The other important factor here is the location of where you plant your strawberries. I don't recommend planting your strawberries out in the middle in the open, like have a bed out in the middle of the open. I would choose a location that does get a good amount of sun, like maybe 6 hours, but gets morning sun. So as you can see, it's the morning right now as I'm recording this. The sun is in the east over here and it's hitting my strawberries because this is a east facing fence. So this side of my yard gets morning sun and that's perfect for these strawberries. That's why I picked this location. I also like to interplant some taller plants. Like I have this garlic here and it does really well with strawberries. I love planting alliums like onions and garlic in with the strawberries. I also have them mulched very well. I have them deeply mulched with shredded leaves, old leaves. And then before I put them in, I put a whole bunch of compost, homemade compost in here. So my goal when I was planning out my strawberry patch a couple years ago when I planted this was to kind of create almost like a more wet kind of woodland kind of area. So when I was choosing my location, I tried to make sure that I recreated that environment, and the fence kind of helps. It helps prevent the wind from drying everything out. So this area stays a little more cool and wet. Another key factor is I have this shade cloth structure up above me here. It doesn't have the shade cloth up here yet, but I'm soon going to put it up. The shade cloth also helps shade out these strawberries. And as far as shade cloth goes, I like to do a 40% shade cloth. I recommend anywhere in between 30 and 50%. If you do too high of a percentage, it's going to shade them out too much and they're not going to do as well. They're not going to get enough sunlight. And a lower percentage is not going to shade them out enough because here in Texas, the sun is like so bright. You probably notice in all of my videos, I'm kind of squinting a little bit because it's just so bright. So that's why we use shade cloth here with a lot of our vegetables, especially things like strawberries and tomatoes. So another important thing you want to consider when you're planning out your strawberry patch is the type of soil that you have and wherever you're going to plant them. So you want to have well-draining soil that is rich in organic matter. So you probably will want to add some kind of compost. And another thing to consider is that strawberries and a lot of other berry plants, they like acidic soil. Now, I live in an area that has very alkaline soil, and that makes it really hard for acidic type of plants like hydrangeas and berries to grow. So I actually amend my soil with soil acidifier, which is a sulfur that you put over here, and it smells. So make sure when you're applying it that you don't have like nice clothes on. I come out here, apply it, and I usually take a shower afterwards. But I'm here to show you that you can actually plant strawberries in alkaline soil. This is native alkaline soil, and I have strawberries in it, and they're thriving in this soil. So you can plant strawberries in an alkaline soil in a hot climate. It's possible, as I'm showing you right here. And the other thing you want to consider when you're planting your strawberries is to make sure not to bury the crown. So when you go to get bare root strawberries, that's how I'd recommend planting them, is using bare root strawberries. And then you kind of spread them out in the area you're going to put them. You want them at least like a foot or so apart. And then you want to make sure that the crown doesn't get buried, because if you don't do that, it could get crown rot and you could lose your plants. So I got my plants from Gurney's, and they're the Chandler varieties I mentioned before. So I'll try to include a link in the description box so you can check that out. And another thing that's super important in the heat is keeping your strawberries watered, especially when you first plant them. The first few months after you plant them, you really want to keep these things watered, and you can just check by sticking your finger in there, and if the top part of the soil's dried out, you need to water it. Mulching heavily helps as well as drip irrigation. I actually planted them in this native alkaline soil instead of in the raised beds for the main reason that this clay soil that I have actually retains water pretty well. The only thing is just that you have to amend the soil so that it has the nutrients that the strawberries need. So definitely make sure that you mulch. As I mentioned, you can use straw, or pine needles would be good because they can make the soil a little more acidic. I use leaves because they're free and easy, and it keeps them very well mulched. And another tip that I have, if you have late freezes in your area, which happened to me this year, is you can actually put the mulch over top of the strawberries, and that will protect the flowers and the fruit. Now, some people might not be able to grow their plants right in the ground or in a raised bed. Some of you guys might be wondering, can I put them in containers? You definitely could. I've seen people do it. I don't know about in the South if that is a good idea. You're probably going to have to water those containers twice a day. Strawberries are shallow rooted plants, and so they will dry out very easily. Even when I first planted these in my native soil, like I was out here constantly watering them. Sometimes I had to come out in the middle of the day and water them until they're a little bit more established. Now I just water them about once a day in the heat with the drip irrigation. So if you do plant them in containers, I would avoid black pots because those get hot and dry out faster. I'd also be wary of putting them in something like a hanging basket, something really shallow that's just going to dry out. And then another thing is you want to make sure that you are regularly fertilizing them. I use a berry fertilizer. It's an organic fertilizer, and I'll try to link that down in the description box below too. And I fertilize them. I just apply a light fertilizer once a month. And then for the soil acidity, I use the soil acidifier in the spring and the fall. So if you've read my close space gardening book, you know that I plant things closer together. In a hot climate, this helps retain moisture. So if you are spacing things farther apart, they're going to dry out faster. It creates more of like a woodland environment when you plant things closer together, and I find that does really well with the heat. Now, one thing that a lot of people are told to do their first year when they plant strawberries is to remove all the runners and to remove all the flowers to let the strawberries establish roots. I personally did not do that. I just let the strawberries do their thing, and I actually did a test batch where I did remove the runners on a few plants and the flowers, and I found that they produce the same the next year. So another really key factor to consider when you're planting your strawberry patch is what time of year to plant your bare root strawberries. So ideally that would be the fall, because that gives the plants time to establish roots over the winter. But I found when I was planting my strawberries that I could not get strawberries in the fall. So I had to do mine in the spring, and I did mine in February. And they still had a few months in those cooler temperatures to establish. So you might be able to get away with late winter or early spring for planting. So a few common problems you may experience when planting strawberries: if you see the leaves looking kind of burnt, that means that they're getting too much sun, they're getting too much heat, so they might need more water or mulching. You need to keep a close eye on them. If you have them looking kind of wilty and kind of rotting, that means they're getting too much moisture, or you might have planted them incorrectly, like you might have buried the crown. If you have small berries, that could happen maybe the first year. So if the first year they're kind of small, that's okay. But after that, if you're still getting small berries, that could be that they're not getting enough nutrients, so you might need to fertilize them. Another common issue that I personally have is I have a lot of pill bugs in my garden because I use some of this leaf mulch and stuff. It attracts the pill bugs, and they love decomposing matter. But the thing is, when they don't have enough food, they will also go after seedlings and small plants. The strawberries are right near the ground, so they tend to go after the fruit as well. And so that's why I have all these bags, all these little mesh bags all over my strawberry patch here. I'll try to include a link for them down below. These little mesh bags work really well for fruits. Like I use them on my grapes and stuff too, to prevent the bugs from eating them, because here in the south we have a lot of bugs. So that's another tip if you have bugs eating your strawberries. So growing strawberries in the heat doesn't have to be frustrating. You just need the right approach. If you want more simple, practical homesteading tips like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Please like this video. And if you're building your dream homestead, please check out my newsletter. I have the link in the description box below. I have tons of tips on how to build your homestead, even if you don't have a lot of space. So please let me know in the comments down below, do you live in a hot climate and do you struggle with growing strawberries? And if you have any concerns, just put them down in the comments and I'll try to respond to them. I hope you guys like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.